Welcome, Khenpo. Thank you for being here.
Well, good afternoon, good morning.
Good afternoon.
My pleasure. I think we've got a couple more people we're waiting for. Here's one more.
Yes. I'll send them a message. Yes, okay. Yeah, I think we are at least all those
ready
we were
to go?
expecting.
Okay.
Yes.
So with the refuge, Sanje chi dane chapsum che dagi jinso ki pe sanam ji drola penjir sanje drupal sho sangye chetan so ki chonam la chandru paradu dane chapsum che dagi jinso so ki pe sanam ki Drola penjir sanje drupal sho sanje charan sogi chanam la chancho barado dane chapsum je dagi jinso ki pesanam ki drola penjir sanje drupal samjen tam Dan dewe judan dembrar jurje donga dan donga ji judan rawar jurje donga mebe dewa tampa tam mendrawar jurje nyere chada nidan rawe danyun shambola nebra jurje. So now please think to yourselves that we are that we must bring all of our mothers, all sentient beings throughout space to the state of Buddhahood. And in order to do that, one method is to engage in Dharma translation. This is, of course, both the way to bring people to Buddhahood when you are actually able to bring people to Buddhahood. And it is also, until that point, it's a way to serve the teachers and gather merit and so forth, and yourself that it is for this purpose that you are in participating in this discussion this morning on this translation. And so with this motivation of bodhicitta. So again, I just want to stress that this motivation is the critical thing. If you don't have the right motivation, no matter how skilled you are with words, your translation will be garbage. Or it won't be garbage, but it won't be very useful. It just won't make a difference in people's lives. If your motivation is contaminated by pride or whatever, if your motivation is you're thinking, well, I'm going to get a job for 84,000 and translate for money. I mean, there's nothing wrong with getting money for translations necessarily. Your motivation, the better your translations are going to be. And part of this is because when you're thinking about the translation in terms of, I need to bring, this translation needs to bring people to Buddha, then you're going to think about, well, how am I going to actually do that? How is it going that, what is actually going to bring people to Buddhahood? And it's not just giving them some sort of intellectual idea. It's giving them something that they can actually use and actually that moves them, that they can use in their practice, that they can use in their study. And having that motivation is really important. So please keep that in mind. And before we go in, because I gave you the bit to all take a look at it yourselves, and I'm sure that you have specific questions about the text. Well, I'm not sure. It's possible, but it's not so likely. Before we get to that, it's better actually to step back and think about what we talked about in one of our earlier sessions. What are we translating? Who are we translating it for? Why? Why? Right? Because if you have that idea, that gives you an idea of how you're going to translate, right? So what is this text that we're looking at? This, of course, it's just an excerpt from a text. What is it? I mean, what is it? And I'd like you to, if we can manage to do this without a whole lot of feedback, where you all just turn on your microphones and speak, that'd be great. I don't know if that's possible if we all have headphones or something on. I think that
Yes,
most
yes.
of you had headphones. Is that?
Yes.
So if you have headphones on, just
Kimberly, you're cut a little bit. I don't know if it's my connection.
and otherwise we'll see. We'll hope that we don't get too much feedback. If we do, we'll, excuse me?
I have the impression that you're cut. I don't know if it's just on my side or.
No, I think it's my end. This place I'm sitting sometimes goes fine, and sometimes it doesn't.
Okay. No
So
yeah.
it may be bad for 5 minutes, then good after that. I don't know. My room does not get good internet reception.
No problem.
Okay.
Just to understand what was happening.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So we all have microphones and we can all talk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
There's no problem.
Right. Good. Excellent. So what is it doing? What is the author trying to do, in other words, if we look at it on a literary level? Just feel free to jump in.
Trying to put people to sit and start meditating.
That's right. That's basically, that's what. Who is it?
Yes.
I mean, who is he talking to? Is he talking to people who have 9-to-5 jobs and want to reduce stress in their lives?
No, I think he's
No.
talking to people who he's trying to get to dedicate their lives to practice.
That's right. So this is people who are already some of the way down the path, right? They've already gotten to a point where they're willing to kind of commit to some degree to retreat, right? Mm-hmm. So he's not talking to, I mean, when you go to your normal Dharma center here in the West, you're going to have a bunch of people, and maybe among them, most of them are people who just want to do better in their lives, and they're kind of interested, right? That's not his target audience, right? So when we're thinking about this, if we were thinking in terms of our own situation, we're talking about people who might be like thinking about, maybe I should do a 3-year retreat. Maybe I should do some serious retreat, right? That's the kind of level of person that he's talking to, right? So, but in that, right? So these are people who had what? They weren't staying home. You're herding yaks anymore, were they?
Sorry, Khenpo, we missed that whole last part with it got cut with the internet.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
It's all right.
So this, yeah. So this text is, it's not for, I mean, if you think about the situation we're in these days, in a Dharma center, we have, a lot of people come in, and when you're translating Dharma texts, mainly you're translating for students around, right? Mostly they're people who have jobs and they do a little bit of Dharma practice on the side, right? So is that our target audience in this?
No.
No. So we're thinking about people who are what? Like planning to really devote themselves to Dharma in some way. Now, if you saw the rest of the text, which I didn't give you, you would see that it really is, what do we say? It's really directed towards people who are planning to do retreat. Excuse me. Forgot to turn one thing on to do not disturb. Now it's not going. There it goes. Right. So so it's talking about giving basic overview of instructions, not specific instructions, but an overview of the most important points that you need to really practice. Right. So it's for serious practitioners. Right. So that's one thing. Now, Penshin Shakyarashi was a great scholar, right? Is he writing in a very scholarly way now? Or is he writing, what is the style?
Doesn't seem like it, right? It seems quite colloquial, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it is pretty cool. It's pretty simple. I mean, of course, this is a translation, but the translator chose words that are not particularly scholarly, right? He's not talking about, he's not using terms from logic or anything like that, right? Now, because it's a translation, it's got some words that are probably a little bit more formal than they would be if you were looking at, say, a talk given, like one of the talks by Gampopa. There are lots of those that are recorded in this similar format, right? So they use a slightly different form of language because they're written in Tibetan. So this is a translation. So he says, like in the first line, he says, Nambar Yangwa, instead of just what a Tibetan would normally originally say, Yangwa, right? To translate it? I don't think it does, right? Okay. So basically what we're looking at here is what we're translating, or what is, oh, I see my connection is unstable again. Are you catching me? You getting through? Okay. So we're looking at what we're translating, who it was intended for, and therefore, who are we writing it for? Or who are we translating it for? So what does this say to us about the type of language that we need to use? Any thoughts?
Simple and straightforward.
Mm-hmm. Straightforward.
There are specific instructions, very precise instructions, simple, like do, visualize, and then gather. Very
right.
Sequential.
Yeah. Yeah. Do this, then do that.
Exactly.
When you're with your friend, think you're going to die before you leave your friend, right? It's like very specific, things to keep in mind when you're doing this. So we're all going to die before this class ends, right? That's what we should have in the back of our mind if we're following these instructions, right? Right. So when we're using this, what level of language do you want to use? I mean, do you want to go, there are lots of different levels. Like there's high philosophical language with jargon. We know we're not doing that. There is like really simple, basic language. Do we want to go that low? Well, it's like you'd hear something on the street. Do you want to go somewhere in the middle? How do you balance it? And this depends a little bit upon the how it's going to come out in your own language. And I think as you work with the material, you get kind of a feel for, the level that the author is speaking on, right? Okay, so that's all pretty clear. Is that? And I just wanted to make sure that you had that all kind of clear in your mind. So now I think should we look at the actual text? Or maybe should we, do you all have any, what do we have? We've got a bit of time. So should we look at the text and go through any specific questions you have or any specific problems you had in translating? Now, I know a lot of it's going to be probably questions about how do I render this word? What is the meaning of this word, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are going to be several questions about it, and we can go through those, but there are also the questions that think about make it have feeling, right? That's another important question to think about, right? Of course, you know, in Spanish and Portuguese and French, I can't do too much help, but so any questions about the text itself? Maybe should I share the text itself or?
Mm-hmm. Just could
Yeah,
you
I'll share the
please
screen.
repeat the second part, not the meaning, but something with the feeling? You got cut for a little bit.
Oh yeah, okay. So we also need to think about, so in addition to talking about the answering questions about specific meaning, we also need to think about how do we communicate that feeling that we're talking about? What can you do in your own language to bring that feeling across? Is there any idea or any difficulty you had at that? Is it like there's some expression that you just can't actually bring this across in an expressive way, right? So that's in the other layer that we can talk about, the specific words, and then how do I get the feeling of the text across?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if we're going to talk about specific words, I should show the text itself. So here we are. So does anyone have any particular questions? Of course, I gave you all the what do we say? I gave you all the my horrid first draft with intentional mistakes. And this is actually worse than I normally do because I intentionally made it bad. So was there any questions? Did you have any specific questions? Why don't we each maybe go one at a time and see if you have any questions?
Yes, for this, the end of this first sentence, to sit around.
Yeah,
could
exactly.
I change that to like waste time or something similar?
Well, you've got to think about that because the meaning is not to waste time. The word is no time to sit there. It's like, so you have to think about that. Like in English, sitting around might be a little bit too colloquial, but we'd say, my grandmother would sometimes say, don't just sit there, do something, right? So in English, there's that sense of, you know, just sitting around and doing nothing. So in English, on a very colloquial level, it works. So there's words, but how much do you change it to bring to get the meaning across in Portuguese, for example, right? So there's a bit of a tension, and there's no right answer on that one. Is there some word that you can do that gets the idea of just sitting there?
In Spanish, we use, for example, the word to sit around would be to remain with your arms crossed. Estar de brazos cruzados means you don't have any activity.
Mm-hmm.
Have time to rest.
But that's a very long phrase. No, this could just be a difference because of Spanish is just a little bit longer than English and Tibetan is even shorter, right? So that's another issue to think about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for example, for that one, what I put was pasártela sentado, like, but I think it might be too literal. I don't know if it conveys the meaning, but I don't know if the feeling.
Uh-huh.
It tells you like it just like, especially in Mexico, you could understand like, you just te la pasas sentado. It's like you're just sitting around, like, but there's something about the feeling of
Uh-huh.
sitting around that is used a lot more often, or
Right.
something like that might not really quite get there. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, this is the question, right? How do you get that word?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in order to keep this meaning of not wasting time, would it be okay to change the expression, even though it's kind of the same amount of words, to go from sitting to crossed hands, or to another sign of another part of the body that shows that we do not have any activity? Is this kind of shifting okay, or should we still stay with the Tibetan, which said to sit? Can we change from one
Well,
expression
here's the
to
question.
another?
My feeling, sometimes you have to. And the question is this one of those times or not? That's the question. Because sometimes sitting around in English gets the idea of you're just hanging out, right? You're just not doing anything. Hanging out is another way to say it. You can't just hang around. But that would be even more colloquial than sitting around. So if in your language sitting has a different connotation, then you have to use a different metaphor. You have to think about it. Like, here's another one. We were just looking at this, thinking about that. We're of the Vajradhara lineage prayer for the Kajimanla book into English, one that can be done with a melody. And so there's a discussion in the first one, in the first of the 4 verses of instruction. It's Shenlo Gomgi Gangpa Sumba Shinra, Shenlo Gomgi Gangpa. So Gangpa is leg or foot. And traditionally it's translated, or most often in English, it's translated as foot. Well, in English, when you say foot, what does that mean? If you just say the foot in the singular, it's like something that something rests on. Right? So it's translating that meaning. But the explanation of the text that you hear in most teachings on it is that this is what you go by. So if you say foot in the singular in English, you're translating the literal meaning, but you're not getting the connotation. If you say legs, you're doing something that other translations haven't, and that everyone's going to revolt against. Everyone's going to be so attached to the foot when they see the new Muslim translation. They're going to be like, "Oh no, why is it legs instead of foot? I liked foot so good, so well." You're just used to it. You think you like it. You're so used to it, but it's because there's a different connotation to it, right? So sometimes it might not be a question of. So this might be something where, like, you were saying they're crossing your arms. It was an Erdeo who was saying crossing your arms, right? So that might actually be perfect for it if you feel it's going to work in the line, in the sentence, right? So you've got some freedom, and you have to use it, and you have to make sure, because things that mean something in one language don't necessarily mean the same thing in another, or the connotations are different. Okay?
Can I go on that one still a little bit more?
Oh, sure.
And that sit around. I'll try to convey in English my doubt in Portuguese. When you said hanging around, it helped me a little bit. I was at first I translated it as sentar à toa, which would mean something like sit around, but it's not a very common usage of sitting. So let's imagine for a sec, like to sit around, it does exist, but it's a bit weird, only a bit. And to hang around would be like better in the meaning sense.
Yeah.
But I'd have to leave the sitting out, which would be ficar à toa. So I was a little bit in this dilemma, because I could use one structure in which I'd keep the verb, the sitting, and it would work, but with a little bit uncomfortable, but just a little bit. Or I could use one which I think would be better.
Right.
I have to leave the verb out.
Yeah.
Like sitting around and hanging around,
Okay.
sort of.
So, yeah. Okay. So this is an excellent point. What we want in this translation is we want people to pick it up and say, wow, I really could die at any moment, and I just don't have any time to waste. I can't just, in English, I can't sit there and do nothing. I got to actually get to work. That's what Takashiri wants the people to think. So what's important is not the action of sitting, right? We also want this to strike people in their heart. This is getting to the question of feeling. If you want it to strike people in the heart, then you have to use the words that are going to hit their heart. If the literal meaning of sitting does not convey that to your heart, changing it is fine. Right? So I think that's what we have to do, you know, otherwise we're going to have it make any sense. Good.
Thank you.
And that paragraph it's more of a just curiosity of what to capitalize and why not, and what you have for true dharma as true capitalized.
Yeah, I know this is a hard one. And the style goes back and forth. So the first thing is that the style differs in every language. As you may well know, in German, they capitalize every noun. In English, we capitalize nouns and verbs. In French and probably in Spanish, you don't necessarily capitalize every word, whereas we would in English. So there are differences in capitalization in every language. And even within each language, there are differences of style. So here, this true dharma, it could be lowercase. And that would work too. Recently, I've been using more lowercase, and then I had an editor criticize me for saying using too much lowercase. Some things need to be uppercase, this editor says. So I was trying it out with true dharma. But when you do it as true dharma with capital letters, then it gets a whole lot heavier.
Yeah.
Right? So if you do true dharma with the small letters, then it's less imposing, right?
Yeah, or you could even try just capitalizing the D for dharma and just true as a qualifier to dharma, or something like that.
Well, you could do that. That looks kind of strange. It's probably best lowercase. But something like this editor wasn't particularly saying with the 3 joules. That should be capitalized, is what she was saying. And so that maybe makes a bit of sense, because you're going for refuge to the 3 joules. It's kind of like a name.
Mm-hmm.
But then, it gets really hard. It just gets there are a lot of gray areas there. Okay. Have we been through this first paragraph or first stanza enough? And shall we move on to the next one and see if you had any issues or any thoughts that came up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay.
I still have one small question. The 6 wanderers.
Okay. Yeah.
So are we talking about the world around, or is it the people themselves? So this is something that we have been talking today also. So is it the place or the people?
Yes. Yeah. So the first thing, you've got the Tibetan and the Sanskrit word gati and the Tibetan word droa can refer either to the realm, whether they're 5 or 6 realms, depending on how you divide them, or they can refer to the wanderers or the beings in those realms. So generally, when we talk about this, when you're thinking about Dungal Samna, if you're saying about here, it could in the Tibetan, it could make sense in either. You could explain it in either way. But generally, we're thinking about the sufferings. Well, we could be thinking about the sentient beings. I mean, is the suffering separate from the sentient beings? It's a good question. The sufferings, but it's the different types of suffering. Mm-hmm. Actually, this is something that you really couldn't say in English, the sentence does not work. And it does in English. If you say 6 wanderers, you're thinking that there are 6 people, talking about 6 people suffering, or 6 beings suffering, not all sentient beings. So if you think about, if you do that like this, as suffering of the 6 realms, that might be a reasonable way to do it, right? Or if you want to have it mean being the 6 types of wanderers, but this gets really clunky.
Yes.
And so actually 6 realms may be the best. Oh.
Yeah. And then we also have the 6 classes of beings.
Well, the 6 realms, it's a draw rikdru yorwa. Rikdru is a draw rikdru sena. The rik literally would mean either a class or a type. But in English, everyone has been translating it as realms, especially in popular Buddhist literature, right? So the term that people know are the 6 realms. Even though that's confusing with the 3 realms, it's the term that people know in English. And so I tend to use it just because people know it, but except in technical places where I might say 6 classes, right? Now, in Spanish and Portuguese and French, there may be another word that you can use. Like in English, you basically just have that one word realm. It's hard to find another one. There might be a different word that you can use in your language that would convey that meaning.
Yeah.
Okay.
In French, it's world that is used, monde.
Le monde.
Yeah, le six monde.
Le six monde. Well, that would make sense.
But then we lose the idea that it is the 6 draw. We lose the draw, the wanderers.
Well, the draw, what that means, it's kind of like, that means both the destination and it also, the place that you go after you die, the next place you're going to. And it also means the being who's going. And the word monde, I don't know. I mean, when you say tout le monde, do you know, you're talking about people, right?
Yes.
So it does have a sense a little bit of people or beings.
Yes, yeah, that's true.
So, but it's a good question. Sometimes I think in an instance like this, though, it's best to be to use the terms that people already know. So if in French everyone says les six mondes, it's probably best to say six mondes here, right? Okay. Good. All right. The next one. Next paragraph regarding that at the beginning only.
Yes.
Okay. Here, of course, there's some things that are really things that I did in my horrid first draft that are definitely horrid.
I reckon
and something that we ought to.
Please.
Yep. Go ahead.
I'm just gonna comment that I think at the beginning only would be first of all the can you hear me?
Yeah. Khenpo is.
Oh, I'm sorry, my internet. Yeah, I didn't catch. Oh, I'm not sure if that's it, but I think your question might be about this phrase, in the beginning only. Is that right?
Yeah, about the kona. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Kona. That kona is difficult.
Yeah.
So I think that in Sanskrit, actually, this is translated from the Sanskrit, right? And in Sanskrit, there is the word eva. I'm going to put it in red in italics. Right? Okay. The word eva often is translated as kona. Right? But it actually doesn't necessarily mean only kona. It can also be like stressing. So I'm wondering if this is just a translator who was too mechanical here. Because it doesn't mean that you only think about this at the beginning, I don't think. Most other instructions don't say that you think about this only at the beginning. Maybe it also means all the way through, but especially beginning. And so one way would be to say, so stressing at the beginning, tolmakonar would be like, maybe colloquially we could say definitely at the beginning to use the wrong level of language, indeed, something like that. That might be another way of handling it, right? So the beginning only doesn't make sense. Beginning indeed is not much better. It doesn't make any sense.
Surely at the beginning you say something like that.
Surely. Right. Well, if you say in English, it has the sense that would have is like, of course you would do it. It's like someone saying you don't do that, and you say, of course you do that. Sort of like a little bit talking down to the person. Surely you'd do that, right? In English, so that's a different level of language. So now in French, it might be perfectly reasonable to say au commencement, certainement, something like that.
Yeah, certainly.
It still sounds strange.
Yeah.
Certainement au début.
I thought it might mean first of all.
But really, I think stressing word. Have I lost one?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Work it.
Or
Okay. I think Eberhard suggested first of all.
First of all, yes.
That's it. Yes.
That might work.
Is it possible? Language-wise?
Yeah. I think it would be possible. I think it would be possible. Yeah. So first of all, that would make a whole lot of sense. So here's something. Here's a point. First of all, makes a lot of sense. And then we think to ourselves, it's got to be right. It makes so much sense. It has to be right because it makes so much sense. Now here it may well be right. So when you have that thought, it makes so much sense, it must be right, don't get too attached to it because often you will find later that it is not.
It's true.
Right now, taking of a first draft, I would say, yes, that's a good idea. Put it in, right? And then later you can look at it. So at the beginning, but really what we're talking about is we're talking about the beginning, the preliminary points of meditation. So first of all, works for that. Now, a question that we have is like, there's this regarding that I put in my hoard. We've got the Dela.
Dela.
Do we actually really need to say this?
That was going to be my question. What is it like?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in Sanskrit, they would begin something like this with the word tatra. So he's saying, basically saying, you've got these stanzas right here that now you're going to give that. So now he's going to say, okay, about those, tatra. And then in Tibetan, that so it's like regarding that is literally, I think, okay, is it right for the feeling? Am I back?
On and off.
More or less, yeah. Sound, yes. The image, not yet. Khenpo. Yes. Now looks okay. Still not.
Would you say Jupchen in French? Certainement, pour commencer.
No, I don't think that there is this idea of to be certain here.
But it's not to be certain, it means...
Yes, yeah. Khenpo was saying that in Sanskrit you have that meaning, yes. Certainement pour commencer.
Abandonne toutes les distractions ordinaires dans un lieu isolé.
Mhm.
Okay.
It's back.
Yes.
Okay, I'm back. I think this might be better. I've raised my computer a few inches so that maybe the Wi-Fi will get through the window better. I don't know if it's clear. I'm sitting right next to the window in my room. When they built this monastery, the sponsors were very installed Wi-Fi signals out.
Nice.
Okay, right. So what I was saying, let me go here, is here in Sanskrit, this would have been tatra. Okay, so which literally means dela. And so what it means, tatra means like about that, or on that. It's tat is the word meaning that, and tatra is like saying on or about. It's putting it as like sort of like a location, referring to that. Okay. So we have this thing, and then now to explain it. So literally, in the English, I just put it very literally, and this horrid first draft is regarding that. Now, one other way you could do this in English, you could say here. That might work.
Here, for
No
instance, yes.
way of doing it.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, were there any other? Any other ideas or questions? Or
For that part, just as a curiosity, would you think taking the whole, like the tatra, the dila part would be too much? Like taking it out, it would take some part of the meaning out?
not necessarily. Just go first of all. It might be fine to leave it out. That also works. It actually is a little bit smoother.
Well, can you relate it? Because he's talking about the advice to, first of all, meditate on that. So could you start the next sentence by therefore, something like that, like link with a word. It's not related to that, but instead of being such a heavy expression. Hello?
I think he's lost again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, you can use or like
So
NC in French might work. So therefore, all of those things. Now, so you have to be careful that there are a lot of different things that this is like therefore.
Yeah.
Would be showing like a reason, and he's not showing a reason. So perhaps in French you could say donc.
Yeah, something like that.
If I can type, donc.
Yes. Yeah.
Of course, I'm mixing up my English.
Yes.
So something like that would work. In other words, ainsi donc, yeah. Oh, and my spell checker doesn't like French either. Really doesn't like French. Okay. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts about this passage or?
This passage.
Yeah, I do not have any assurance that I will not die today or tonight only. My question is with the word only.
Yes, because again we have that konar. So day, you could say this very day or night. That would be another way of saying it, which would make a lot of sense. So this is one point where it is helpful to know Sanskrit when you're translating a text that's done from Sanskrit. Now, I know that you're all busy studying Tibetan, and Sanskrit is probably down the road for you in terms of priorities. But knowing knowing a little bit about it is helpful. Like, so when you see something, when you see the word kona in a Sanskrit translation, it is often a translation of eva. So the word eva just is like stressing, right? And that would translate, it could be translated as konar or ni, or konar and ni are sort of like the main ones that it's translated as. But I would say I don't have any assurance that I will not die this very day or this very night. Probably in English, we'd have to say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then it's going to make more sense. If I'm going to say today only, it doesn't make sense.
And this
What about
is
this instruction?
probably.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
This is probably a doubt on the Tibetan structure of the phrase, not really on translation, but can I usually say that the konar would be related to both the day and the night? Where is it? Deringam. Don't know. Wasn't doubt if it was like this day or this very night, or this very day and very night.
Right. Right here in this draft, I've just done this very day or very night. Literally in the Tibetan, you've got the kona. So I think that modifies this phrase. Let me just take out some of my red so that it's out here. Take it out actually. So I think the konar would probably be emphasizing teringam tono. So basically in Tibetan, the way it works is that the modifier goes at the end of the phrase that it modifies, even if there's a she in the middle, because the she doesn't really make us a period, right? So that she. So generally, like when you'd have the, I don't know, gyatso chembo konar, something like that. It goes at the very end, right, of that phrase. I don't know, chamda ninje konar, something like that. Then it would be obviously both, modifying both chamda ninje, right? So yes. Okay. What about this phrase that, I'm going to take off some of this red just because it's getting there's too much red and I can't highlight things anymore. This phrase, yi nandu ku, which I did as, again, a very overly literal. Gather your mind inward.
Identified from the bottom of your heart.
From the bottom of your heart.
Is that too much going?
Well, let's think about what is the meaning, right? It's not from the bottom of the heart would make sense, but I think that this is yi nandu ku. So normally our mind goes out. So instead of our mind going out and looking external things, we need to bring the mind in. So from the bottom of the heart doesn't say that so much. Ku is like to bring in. So that's why I kind of use gather. So
could it be something
in
like
English, it might be most.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Better for you all to think than for me to tell you answers.
I was thinking, wouldn't it be similar if we just put
Go
then
ahead.
focus inward or something like that? Or just then
Yeah.
focus and think.
Focus inward, or in English, you could say, turn your mind inward. Something like that. Now, it's going to be different in, of course, obviously, different in your language. So this is another point where you don't have to, because kukpa means, it's the word that we always use when we're summoning someone. So this is why I considered in doing my horrid translation, I had considered putting in this overly literal summon your mind inward, which would have been absolutely right.
Yeah, of course.
But in English, way to do it, turn your attention inward. Different connotations. So you have to think about it. Okay. Is that all making sense?
Would it, and again, we have the same only at the very end, right? It's the same word.
It's the same thing. This is actually the exact same expression.
Yeah.
Right? Teringam tonuk konar chinyam. So again, this would be this very, I don't know. I gotta think about how to phrase it. Well, let's move on a little bit. Shall we move? We haven't gone through everything here, but I don't think we've got time to go through everything. So if let's move on here. I have a question about this verb. 내가 또 독양. 대니도 치외 두세라.
Yes.
So I had a stupid literal translation as sit.
Maybe you can translate even more literally with to be, no matter where you are.
That actually makes sense, because then it also includes standing. Do, do actually, I'm not sure if literally do is to be or if it's literally to sit, because it's very frequently used in the sense of sitting. So you have to be careful about that one, especially in older language. So, these days it's the helping verb that we use for do, to be, but it's not necessarily that. And here you there make it even more
Very place.
Didn't need to add that very, or another one would be in English, on that very spot. So these are the things, and you're going to find, you're going to find these different differences in your own language, things that you would use, of course, that'll be different than we do in English, but it's okay to be free, or to use different, use something that's going to make it heartfelt, and make it idiomatic. What about here? This one.
Yes.
And then down here, my horrid translation. This is just terrible.
When you're friends with any friend. 115, yes.
Could it be more
Okay.
similar to the other two sentences? No matter who you are friends with?
Means the verb actually doesn't mean to be friends with someone. It means to be associated with them. So here, actually, you could say no matter who you are with. This would be a more idiomatic way of saying that same thing in English, but there's no word friend. But be associate with someone, right? No matter who you are with, think you will die, then even before you part. Or you could say part company. Right. So this is something where you've got that.
I read it as no matter how many friends you have. In Spanish, I wrote it.
Right.
That's just that's just not understanding the translation.
Right. So let's just go back here and take a look at it.
Being creative.
So you've got.
As you read, you get a sensation, and then you find
friends
something.
with any friends. Yeah.
Well, see, this is.
Yes, but then yes.
Gong. So gong would be, the gong here is like any friend. Gong is like a general. What they say is jigi. So whoever, so it's like whoever you are with.
It's not control.
No matter who you're with, and you could also say whoever you are with. Right, exactly. That's the colloquial Tibetan these days.
But then draw is much larger in the meaning than friend in English, because colleague can be a drobo. Lero.
A drobo, yeah. Lero. Well, you've got lero, ledro,
yeah,
chudro, and all that. So yeah,
chudro, yeah.
Chudro.
So company is much better for draw than actually friends, which is much more restrictive.
Well, if the problem with company in English is that it's a very high level of language, or it's a different level of language, and it doesn't strike. And so, I said no matter who you're with or whomever you are with, just leaving out in French or compagnie might be perfect. In English, you could say, no matter, or whoever's company you are in. You could say that. People would understand it. But it would sound to them like you're, that you're straight out of the 18th century. It doesn't sound like the 21st. Might make it perfect in French. It might be because it sounds exactly like perfect 21st century French, right?
Yeah, I think French people like.
But if it sounds like it would have been written.
Yeah, I think French people like.
I mean, if it sounds in French like it was written by.
Please continue.
Oh, the high language. Yeah.
Yes.
If it sounds in French like it was written by Jean Racine, then it's not going to sound like it's written by people these days, right? In English, if it sounds like Shakespeare, it's going to sound strange. Both are beautiful writers, but they're old language. So that's not what we want to recreate here. We want to use the language that people use. So in English, this is why probably That I think is probably the best way to express it in English. And then here, there's a dedamadar part from them. So this would be my main, this is, I think, how that whole sentence should go in English. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Then we also have here the chawachi chekyang. De matsar war, de matsar bar. Which is it?
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
Whatever you do, cuántas actividades tengas. No, matzar before finishing. Yeah.
I would go for the war because otherwise.
Matsar war.
Yeah, because otherwise, if it is so colloquial Tibetan, it would beg for the two afterwards, with the Laden afterwards. The Matsar Bardo. So if the Laden is missing, then it looks like more sophisticated Tibetan.
But it could be Matsar bar. That also does occur in written language, not so much in the. All right, so it could be, but it shouldn't be. What I had here in my horrid draft was no matter what action you.
I lose Khenpo.
Yes, Khenpo is cut.
This is like the action. Chepa is the doing, so doing the no matter what action you are doing. Okay, that's if you read it. Now, if you think it is matzah body, think you will die. Baradu would normally be like until. We usually think of that in the dictionary. But here it would be matzah bar, so before you finish it. So it could be either. But if I were taking a look at this and just in terms of which seems stronger, I think that one's going to have more emotional impact. Okay. Does that make sense? Now, the other thing that I think is worth pointing out here, if we look at the Tibetan, we've got kind of a parallel structure. You've got the kyang here and another one here. So it calls on a gandu duk kyang, calls it a drop kyang, che kyang. So there's a parallel structure. So it's good to have also to do a similar parallel structure in your translation. You see that? So in English, what I just did this morning, no matter where you are, no matter, you've got these five, the three, no matter where, no matter who, or what. And that kind of gets the dukkyang, that kind of similar. Gangdan drokkyang, gangdan dukkyang, chi che kyang. So all of these are kind of similar in Tibetan. So putting it with the same structure in English also helps capture that flavor in Tibetan. Or that, excuse me, capture the flavor of the Tibetan in your language. But actually here, this English is a little bit more, what do we say? A stronger parallel than there is in the Tibetan. Of course, we don't know exactly what it was in the Sanskrit, but there probably was a pretty strong parallel there too. Okay. Well, we've gone about an hour, a little bit over an hour this morning, and we haven't gone ever. If you have any really pressing questions now, then we could maybe take one or two more questions. Otherwise, I think you've get an idea of how I think about it and how I look at these things. And so these are all just totally my own opinions. And of course, you have to work through it on your own. But I think I hope it gives you an idea of what you can look at and what you can think about.
I have a question about the very last sentence.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
We can't live without that one.
I have no idea what's happening there.
Really simple.
I have a guess, can I?
Oh, okay. What's your guess?
To distinguish minutely, as if you're like
Yes, that's it.
getting one hair from
Yeah.
the other one, like really.
I see.
Yeah, your sound broke up, but that I think is exactly what it is. I think it might have broken up on mine. I'm seeing that my connection is unstable because what we have here, we've got the differences of your intent, right? So you're talking about good intentions and bad intentions. So you will be able to distinguish them finely. Now, that's not a particularly beautiful English term, but that's kind of the meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Sampa here is intentions. It's not the thoughts. Is it?
It's not so good.
Seem to be back now.
Okay, I think it's back. Yeah. So the differences of your intentions. Yes, Sampa can be translated into many different terms in English, but one of the main ones is an intention. Think a specific idea of what you're going to do. Oh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're still there. You're still there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still there. Okay.
Yes.
So you've got the difference. Yeah, you've got the difference between two words. Sampa. Oh, Sampa. Sampa. Let me just make. Sampa here would be like kind of a specific thing, like it's I'm going to do this step and that step. Sempa is more like a general wish to do something. So like your sempa would be like your chanchupki semkye, right? Semkye. The sempa is, I want to achieve Buddhahood, right? And then your sampa is, I'm going to study translation on the way, something like that. Or I'm going to do this specific action. Or it could be a different one. Your sempa is, I'd really love to have some pork tonight for dinner. And then your sampa is, I'm going to get that knife and go slaughter the pig, right? So it's like the general versus the specific. So general, the general wish to do. So that's an important This comes in Abhidharma, in the second chapter of the Treasury of Abhidharma. Okay. I
Thank you very
think
much.
between the internet connection and everything else, that's enough for today. And so let's now dedicate the merit of our discussion this morning to the benefit of all sentient beings. O sunam de tam je se bani tomnen ye beranam pam Gegana Shibalong Chubai Sibetsolero Kunyuro Sho. Okay, thank you very much. And so,
Thank you very much.
yeah.
Thank
Yes.
Thank you
So
very
I now
much.
have what? I have the 2 months of Abhidharma class going on. And then it'll be, I think the month of August is sacred in parts of Europe. And so, but at some point, hopefully we can all get together and talk about some translation again. So thank you very much.
Thank
Yes,
you.
it's really wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
That was great.
Yeah, thank you.